come back to the studio where we have Ben Margolis here, who was until very recently the campaigns director for TckTckTck, the award-winning movement.
That's correct.
That did such a great job at Copenhagen. Perhaps you could tell us something about that, Ben, for starters.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. I was hoping to actually be in Montreal at the moment at the Montreal Millennium Summit. I was kindly invited to speak on the panel, but unfortunately, or fortunately, the volcano in Iceland has prevented me from travelling there, as so many other people have had their travel plans delayed, and we're of course saving thousands of tons of carbon emissions along the way, so it's great to be able to be here. Anyway, TckTckTck came about at the beginning of 2009 really as a recognition for many of the world's biggest NGOs that something different had to be done if we were going to try and get a good deal out of Copenhagen. The UNFCCC process, of course, many people remember Copenhagen, but has been going on for 17 years, I think. It started really in 92 and got going in 1994. And so the NGO community really felt that not enough had been done to move that process on towards actually getting a good outcome. So at the beginning of 2009, about 30 organisations from Oxfam to WWF and Greenpeace, the World Council of Churches and others, came together and put in place a strategy to try to influence the outcomes of the summit. The fundamental ask of the summit was three very simple words. We needed it to be fair, we needed it to be ambitious, and we needed it to be binding. A FAB deal, a fair, ambitious and binding deal. A fair deal on the lines of climate justice, a fair deal that was fair for the poorest people in the world, who are the least responsible for climate change and the most affected by its impacts. An ambitious deal that went far enough to actually tackling the crisis that we're seeing. And a binding deal, because without a binding instrument, it's too easy for governments to sign up to something and then for them actually not to take on what they've agreed to. So TckTckTck really got going about halfway through last year, and by Copenhagen we'd seen this phenomenal coming together of about 250 organisations, 15 million people around the world calling for a fair, ambitious and binding deal, and hundreds and thousands of events, actions, activities taking place all over the world with people coming together around this common demand. The fundamental outcome, of course, was that we didn't get a fair deal. It wasn't fair, there wasn't enough money put on the table, there wasn't enough pledged by the wealthiest countries in the world. We didn't see the level of ambition that we needed, there wasn't the cuts that we needed, and there was no binding deal. So it's easy to look back on Copenhagen as a massive missed opportunity, and indeed it was a massive missed opportunity from world governments to agree to climate justice. But it doesn't end there, there's still a massive amount going on, and I think in a way Copenhagen did do something really important, and it really gave an opportunity to galvanize civil society. It allowed these organizations whose supporters for many years have followed debates around climate change to be galvanized around this moment in time and to come together with a recognition that no single political moment is going to find all the resolutions we need to this enormous crisis that we're facing, but that it is an opportunity to really catalyze and build a movement. And there was three moments last year that I think really symbolize that for me, and I'm sure there's others for other people, but those three moments are engraved in my memory: September the 21st, October the 24th and December the 12th. Three huge days of action. On September the 21st, led by Avaz, TckTckTck organised 4,000 events in 130 countries. On October the 24th, the 350.org Day of Action, there was 5,000 events in 180 countries. And then on December the 12th, we saw 100,000 people come out on the streets of Copenhagen for the biggest ever demonstration on climate change, and certainly the biggest that Denmark has ever seen. And some of the negotiations we saw with the authorities and the police in the lead up certainly showed that they weren't expecting anything like the massive turnout that there was. So what we know is that the people around the world, people in countries around the world, want a fair, ambitious and binding deal, see the UN as the legitimate place for that deal to be made, and have an expectation of governments that goes far, far beyond the commitments that we're seeing, certainly from the wealthiest governments. As I say, that movement now continues, and in 2010 and 2011, a lot of what was started in 2009 is being taken forward already. The 350.org, the team behind 350.org, is organising a major day of action on the 10th of the 10th, 2010, linked in with the 10-10 campaign, which is trying to get people to cut 10% of their emissions in 2010. And there's something interesting behind that, which I think comes from a moment when civil society are just stepping back a bit from an expectation and a belief that governments are going to be able to make the level of difference needed in the time needed to cut our emissions enough to prevent the tipping points and the massive consequences that we're already seeing becoming even worse, and saying, well, we have to do it ourselves. We have to start doing it ourselves. And with 1010, we've seen businesses, institutions, schools signing up and say, we're going to start doing this in the belief, the hope, the assumption, the need that governments will continue to do it. So Copenhagen didn't achieve the fair, ambitious and binding deal that we were hoping for, but it certainly catalysed a movement that will go forward from here and become even stronger.
Great. Thanks very much, Ben. But I'm very struck by the fact that, well, when I introduced you, I said you were until recently the campaign director. I wonder if you could say something slightly more personal, because I know that you didn't go off to take another conventional or unconventional job. You decided to really do something more soul-searching, if I could put it like that.
Yeah. There's a few things behind that. So I, as you say, I left GCCA, the organisation that runs TckTckTck, and in fact Oxfam. I've been employed by Oxfam for the last 5 years, but they've very kindly supported me to work for other coalitions. Mainly I worked for GCAP, the Global Call to Action Against Poverty, for a couple of years before joining GCCA, and really was at the cut and thrust of the big international political moments at which certainly most of the big NGOs still hang their hopes for change to happen in the coming years. But what we've started to see a recognition of, I think, creates some level of dichotomy between that theory of change and the scale of change that we need. And when you talked 5 years ago, maybe, to a lot of the mainstream NGOs, groups like Oxfam and WWF, the theory of change was a long-term theory of change. It was focused on issues of trade, of ocean rights, of education, of health and so on, and was an expectation that maybe in 5 years, in 10 years, in 15 years, in 20 years, we will start to see what we're putting in place now, creating the level of change necessary. But now with climate change, that's all changed, and what we need now is of course a much faster pace of change, and there's a recognition of that.